Well, hello there. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole, with us from now until just before midnight, and lovely to see both of you. As ever, let's check out the front pages, though, first of all, starting with The Telegraph, which leads with comments from the Defence Secretary that the UK must pay for tanks, but not more troops to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia. The Eye reports on the discovery of the new Alzheimer's drug, which it's believed could slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease if discovered early enough, and may be available on the NHS, the paper says, as soon as 2025. Indeed, Pippa's paper, The Guardian, says there's heavy pressure to get the drug approved and onto the market as soon as possible. The Daily Mail calls it a turning point in the fight against Alzheimer's, while the Times call it a new era for Alzheimer's. After fresh protests in London, the Metro tells Just Stop Oil campaigners to just shove off. The FT hears that Microsoft could fall foul of EU competition laws for bundling its Teams video conferencing programme together with its Office software. The Sun reports that TV personality Melanie Sykes has been diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. And The Star has a story about hackers' efforts to uncover the truth, in heavy quotes, about UFOs and aliens. Well, a quick reminder, by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages for yourself while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. And Pippa, plenty of coverage of this new Alzheimer's drug, the second one. It's an indication, really, how desperate people are to see some progression with this truly terrible disease.
Yeah, some progression, but also, scientists have been working on drugs for dementia and Alzheimer's for years, and there hasn't been a significant breakthrough really in the last 2 decades. So the fact that this drug donanemab, I probably haven't pronounced that properly, Anna, you'll be better at that than me, I'm sure. But the fact that they've developed this, it's not a cure, but it is a treatment, and it does substantially slow cognitive decline. They suggest by about 35% in people with Alzheimer's. Now, of course, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There are other types of dementia, such as vascular dementia, which this doesn't affect. And there are significant side effects, but nevertheless, it's the first really substantial change and development that we've had in Alzheimer's treatment. And when you consider, we all anecdotally in our own lives know people that have or have had Alzheimer's. I know close members of my family have, and the numbers are growing all the time as the population gets, as we have a sort of a growing elderly population. The pressure that puts on social care and on the NHS, and will do increasingly in the future, is immense. So not just from obviously a sort of, a humane perspective, and the fact that people will be able to manage their own affairs for longer and remember their family members for longer, but also from a sort of a public services perspective, and making sure that that our health and social care systems can cope and don't collapse in future. This is potentially a really significant breakthrough. So really good news all around on this.
Yes, and the Director of Research at Alzheimer's Research UK is quoted by The Guardian, in fact, saying it was critical for regulators to act promptly to avoid patients experiencing waits for this clinically effective treatments, saying we now have 2 potentially life-changing Alzheimer's treatments on the horizon. We need to see rapid regulatory decisions. The question is whether, given the numbers of people in this country, Harry, who actually have early stage Alzheimer's, whether there'd be the availability for this treatment to operate in this country.
Yeah, papers reporting tomorrow potentially 750,000 people this could benefit, but actually Britain is languishing in the sort of global league tables for the sophisticated scanners that are required to detect early onset Alzheimer's early enough for this drug to be as effective as it could be. In fact, we only have 88 of these scanners in the country, and actually it's not just about getting these drugs through the regulatory bodies, it's making sure the NHS is actually prepared to be able to make the most of them and extract the most benefit from these drugs once they are approved. And I presume they will be approved at this rate, given the sort of glowing final reports from the manufacturers. But yeah, no, investment is going to have to come for more scanners, which 88 across the entire country doesn't seem that many on my back of the envelope maths to me.
Yes, first of all, to discover if you have this mild cognitive impairment, and then get these monthly infusions of donanemab and the other drug that we mentioned as well. Let's move on, shall we? Harry, I'm going to stick with you if you don't mind, heading to a story that's got your name on with an exclusive. Sunak eyes an early cabinet clear-out. What do you call early?
Well, if some people I've been speaking to tonight are to be believed, it could come as soon as this week. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, announced on Sunday officially that he was ready to go at the next reshuffle. He's not going to fight the next election. He doesn't want to be part of the sort of election campaign as a cabinet minister if he's not going to fight his own seat. So he told the Prime Minister a few weeks ago that he's off. As and when the Prime Minister would like to reshuffle his team. Now, Wallace's people point to a slightly hostile briefing in Saturday's papers, basically revealing this, which led to him to then go public with his claims of his departure in the Sunday papers, which has actually sped up a sort of debate that's been happening in Downing Street about when to reshuffle the team before the next election. They've probably got one go at getting the sort of cabinet, election ready. Now, because Wallace has basically said, I'm off, that's a serious proper role in cabinet that is up for grabs now. So to avoid perhaps a summer of speculation and possibly to distract from what every Tory I've spoken to thinks is going to be a triple by-election defeat on Thursday, there's definitely a conversation that's been had in Downing Street of perhaps maybe move this reshuffle that was penciled in for September to perhaps maybe as soon as this weekend. No decisions made. I think the likelihood is they'll still go long, but there's definitely an element of a reshuffle being in play in the coming days.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, the only problem is it looks a bit reactionary if indeed the by-elections in Uxbridge, Selby and that Somerset seat of Somerton and Frome go disastrously wrong for the Conservative Party. What's your bet, Pippa?
Well, I think I've spoken to people people in Downing Street and in government over the last week or so, and by process of deduction, it seems most likely that there will be a reshuffle this side of the summer. Not least because if you wait until after the summer, as Harry says, there's obviously speculation over the course of the summer months, but you potentially are appointing somebody just before party political conferences, which makes it very difficult for them to catch up. Generally, they prefer having people in post, learning their brief, having the time to get their sort of feet under the table over the summer months. And then if they wait till after party conferences, then you're in a position where you've just had a minister stand up and make all these policy pledges in their area, and then you're replacing them in their job with somebody else, within weeks. So neither of those look like particularly credible options. So I've always thought that it's much more likely that it will come this side of the summer. And of course, nothing better than reshuffle to try and reset the narrative after what could be potentially very difficult by-election results for the Prime Minister on Thursday. So I think all eyes definitely on Friday.
Yeah, and just your bet for who might replace Ben Wallace. I mean, one suggestion that the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, might be moved. Kind of a demotion, but we are at war. Harry, your bet?
I think it would be someone with close links to Sunak and a Treasury mindset. There's lots of arguments and debates, as we'll discuss later on, I think, and in some of the other front pages about the future of armed forces spending. Treasury and the MOD have been loggerheads for as long as I've been a journalist. I wonder whether Mr. Sunak, the Treasury man, will put another Treasury man, perhaps John Glenn, into the Treasury, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's Chief Secretary to the Treasury now. If you move the Foreign Secretary, that's a big move. You move the Home Secretary, that's a big move. I wonder whether the reshuffle will be a slightly a grade below sort of big officers of state.
And just a name quickly, Pippa. I'm only going to see if you got it right, if there's one soon.
I think John Glenn isn't a bad bet, particularly since he was tweeting out pictures of himself with serving military in his constituency in Salisbury not too long ago. But the other one that really wants it is Tom Tugendhat, the security minister, of course, a former army officer himself. Whether Sunak thinks he's ready for promotion at that level, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we will indeed. We'll mark it down, see if you're right later on. And you teased ahead to another story in the later part of our programme, Harry, as well. Pippa, let's stay with you. Your story on Keir Starmer and this decision not to scrap the two-child benefit cap if Labour wins power.
Yeah, so this is actually following on sort of a day two after an interview that Starmer gave at the weekend, in which he said that it was not going to be Labour policy to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which obviously for a lot of people within the Labour movement was deeply problematic, not just morally, but also because there's been a variety of studies which suggested that the policy actually doesn't work. It was introduced, initially devised by George Osborne in the austerity era and brought in 2017. And the idea of it was to incentivise either people back into work or to work longer hours, or indeed to not have so many children. But it doesn't seem to have worked on either of those fronts. In fact, it seems like the main outcome is that it's driven more people into poverty. However, Labour is in a position where they're very reluctant to make any public spending promises when they want to present themselves as having being very, very committed to fiscal responsibility, and making any public spending pledges, even something like this, which would potentially cost £1.5 billion a year, is not something they want to do unless they can say how it would be funded. They're obviously all anxious about the prospect of the Conservatives totting up all those, if they were to do that, totting up all those potential promises and saying that they're unfunded, uncosted, same old Labour, all that sort of thing, when they're trying very, very hard, particularly after the difficult time the Conservatives have had in the economy in recent times, to show that they are prudent, they are responsible, and that the economy would be in safe hands under them. So it's wider than just this particular issue, problematic though that is for Starmer, and though that's causing split right at the top of his party. It's more for them, for Starmer and the leadership, about setting the tone and making it clear that they're not prepared to do anything that's unfunded.
Yes, all big positioning ahead of you know what. Lots of photographs on the front pages and insights too about the heat in Europe, including the Daily Telegraph, which pictures the Balearic island of Menorca. A festival, in fact, but the Metro's decided to pick up on Just Stop Oil Eco Mob, as they put it, bringing the capital to a halt, just shove off. Do you think it focuses the mind, the temperatures we're seeing in Europe, Harry, and makes people more supportive of the direct action we've had in this country?
No, I don't think so. I think actually, but forgive me for saying, I think the heat wave coverage of Europe has been completely fantastically overblown. It's not the first time it's been a bit hot in Europe and temperatures have reached 40 degrees. It's almost an element of hysteria about.
Yeah, but it's nearly 50. It's going to be nearly 50.
But yeah, it's a heat wave. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are suddenly going to allow, Tarquin and Tabitha to sit in front of their cars while they're trying to get to work. There's no connection between the two. People are finally waking up to Just Stop Oil and their ridiculous tactics. It seems like the police are finally doing something, and I think you're seeing the reaction of the public there as people sort of take action into their own hands. People are fed up with this. They don't want it. And they don't like being lectured by someone sitting in the street. Yeah, but if it hit 50 here, they might take action as well. Let's be honest about it. But when that happens, let's have that conversation. But that's not going to happen.
Well, wildfire pictures there in Greece. Pippa was violently shaking her head through all of that. I haven't got time to go to it. I need to go to a break, but we will return to that, I've no doubt, later this evening. Lots still to come. The government, with its plans to allow more foreign bricklayers into the country, discussing that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole from The Sun and The Guardian and The Sun. Get it the right way around. Apologies, Pippa. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph, and I'm going to go to you, Harry, on this. You've already alluded to it. This is Ben Wallace effectively acknowledging that, yes, the numbers of fully trained troops in the UK are falling, but as he put it, they can't go to war with a pitchfork. They need kit, and it's expensive. So it's all about the sums again, isn't it, really, as they release the Defence Command paper tomorrow.
Yes, so this update of Britain's place in the world, a sort of review of the war in Ukraine and how it affects our armed forces, will be published. And I think actually it will take into account a lot of what happened to Russia's troops, meant to be one of the most feared armed forces in the world, but have been, found utterly wanting at times during the invasion of Ukraine. And that's because of a lack of sophisticated kit, a lack of training, a lack of joined up fighting, a lack of information warfare, electronic warfare. And actually, Wallace is making the point in a sort of departing, almost swan song interview. It wasn't just with the Telegraph; it was an all-round briefing for the papers tomorrow, ahead of this command paper. That actually, look, he had been battling with Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor for more money for the armed forces, and ultimately Jeremy Hunt, who replaced who's now the Chancellor. And there was some additional money, but not enough to simply undo a planned cut of around 10,000 troops in the size of the British Army down to its lowest size in a long, long time of 72,000. So he's basically saying, look, you got to deal with the hand you're dealt, and it's as much as it would be nice to say no, we're not going to take the army down to that size. It's more important to have a ruthlessly and properly equipped and trained forces rather than a larger force with dodgy gear, as proven by the Russians.
Yeah. On to the Sun. Pippa, for you, where should we get our workers from? The suggestion that some, key jobs like builders, roofers, carpenters and plasterers are being added to the so-called shortage occupations list, which means they can come from abroad. The suggestion is they should be trained here in the UK. The debate rages again.
Yes, and this is actually Harry's story with one of his colleagues. And well, no, I'm very happy to talk about it. It's obviously an issue which has been it's obviously been an issue which has been ongoing for some time. Which really sort of came to a head over Brexit. This sort of conflict between importing workers to do particular jobs, skilled or otherwise, and training up our own workforce. And the sort of the recognition that in some sectors, for example, in fruit picking and farming and so on, that British workers didn't want to do those jobs, and by cutting off people coming over from places like Eastern Europe, we were putting farmers in a difficult position. And the government's previously made provisions within the seasonal worker scheme to have people working on farms, for example. The building industry is another one. And anybody that's had any building work done or neighbours that have building work done knows that it's got dramatically more expensive, not least just the cost of importing goods, but also labour, because, of course, our market was absolutely supported by predominantly Eastern European tradesmen and tradespeople coming over from Eastern Europe, and that hasn't happened post-Brexit. People have gone back, and there's absolutely an economic nationalism argument that we should be training up people and companies should be investing in British workers to do these jobs. But that, I suppose, is a longer-term thing, and it hasn't happened thus far. And I think there are short-term issues with gaps that need to be plugged now. Jeremy Hunt even, and Cyril O'Brien have come to this agreement in order to keep this sector of the economy ticking over this time. But the pressure will be on them to think longer term and try and address some of the skills shortages that exist in the UK.
Pippa, thank you. Harry, I promise I'll let you talk about that one next time. Both of you, lovely to see you. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Back for more in the 11, of course. The weather is next.